Hi, today you are embroidering with coding. This is the second part of the pinpoint placement video. So this is another thing you can use with the new upgrade to the 880 Plus and the 790 Plus when it comes to pinpoint placement. So our first video went over lining up your designs to make them as crooked as our fabric is, using a X and Y axis that we have that we drew on our fabric or a t-shirt before we put it in the hoop. Now, this is really applied if we are quilting in the hoop. So here's our design. It's a square quilting design. And down on our little fabric, which is our little mock quilt, I drew a square. And I drew it kind of cockeyed. But then after I drew it, so this would represent your quilt block or your quilt square. So one thing you would want to do is you just hoop it, and when you hoop a quilt to quilt in the hoop, it's just going to be your quilt top, batting, and quilt backing. There's no need for a stabilizer. But one of the most important things we want to do is we want to find the center of each side so we can get our design in there nice and straight. So what we're going to do, go back to the screen. So we're going to go, so we have our square design that will fit in that square perfectly. So we'll go to our eye, and we'll go to our pinpoint placement. So the same grid that we used before, we're going to use it here. So but with this one, we're going to select this dot first. So it moved, so I'll show you where we're at. So you can see here, this is where that point currently is. So the design is outside of our quilt block, but we don't want it to be outside of our quilt block. We want it to be inside of our quilt block. So we can clearly see we need to move over a little bit. So we're going to use our stitch width knob, which is our top knob, and we're going to move it over. And we're going to drop the needle again. Drop the needle again, and we see we need to come over a hair more and down. So we'll come over and down. Close enough. So now what we're going to do is going to go back to our screen. And so that's the point we're working with, because we can see it has the white line around it. So now we're going to set that point. So hit set and it turns yellow. Now we're going to hit this point. So we'll go back to our quilt block. So here, this is where that point is. So we see we have a long way to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to move it down. And then we're going to move it over. So if you happen to see my other the part one of the pinpoint placement, you'll remember after we set the first point and then we went to go set the second point, I specifically said only use one knob because it's going to change the size of our design. However, in this case, we want it to change the size of our design. So I'll move back to the screen so you can see what's happening while I use my knobs. While I use my knobs to get that needle to that dot that you saw. So if you notice, the size of our design is changing proportionally to fit inside of that hoop. This is an awesome feature. So when we are trying to take a design and fit it with inside something, not only can we make it as crooked as our fabric is, so once everything's out of the hoop, it's all lined up perfectly, but we can also change the size of the design. So once we have that done, we'll set it, and now you can see our design is as crooked as our fabric. Super, super awesome. So this makes it amazingly easy to fit a design that may be too big or too small for the particular quilting square that we have, but we can shrink it down to size by using the size of the quilt block. We don't really have to measure anything. All we did was, in this case, we drew the square, but this would be a cut square that that would be in our quilt block. All we had to do is measure from here to here and find the center. And then that center should be the same on this side. And we just measure down. Like this one was a 4.5 inch square. So we just measured down 2 1/4 and 2 1/4 to find that center. And that's how we lined up this point, which was originally over here. So we brought it over, locked it or set it. And then our other point was way over here. So we moved it down and moved it over. And by moving it over, by using both knobs, it then shrank the design to fit in here perfect. Now, the one thing to remember is, so if you're working with a square like this, you want to work with a square quilting motif. If you work, depends on what type of shape you're working with, the type of shape you want to quilt with, because it shrinks the design or increases the design proportionally. But a circular design would work beautifully in here. And the machine has a few built-in quilting motifs. So I'll show you what some of these are. So they are right here. And you can see you have a number of quilting motifs that would fit in there perfectly. And we sell a number of quilting motifs. One of my favorites is a Tulip Pink embroidery collection. But Amanda Murphy has a number of quilting designs that work fabulously for so many projects. All right, well, that's the second part of the pinpoint placement. And if you have any questions, leave a comment in the comment section below. Otherwise, happy embroidering.